Hello and welcome to the next part of my Descent video tutorial. In this part, I'm going to be covering the basics of movement and your weaponry. So, there's a few things you need to know, some little peculiarities about this game's physics engine, that I'm going to cover straight off the bat. The first one concerns rotation. Now, obviously this is being a full 3D, 6 degrees of freedom, full 3D free movement and rotation. You can rotate and move on 3 axes. So, you can see right now I'm rotating left to right, we'll roll left to right, and we'll rotate up and down. Now you're going to notice something about this up and down rotation, this vertical rotation. It's slow. It's very, very slow. In fact, it's about half the speed of the other 2 methods of rotation. So this is something you need to keep in mind when you're flying around, and remember that vertical rotation is very slow and you don't want to be using it exclusively. So if, say, I needed to face the floor after coming out of this hallway, I wouldn't want to just rotate down. Instead, I'm going to want to combine the other 2 axes of rotation to face the floor more quickly. So, for instance, like that. As you can see, that's much smoother, much more fluid, and much quicker than just sole vertical rotation. So that's a motion you're going to want to practice. It's combining different rotations to quickly turn where you need to be going. That said, now we'll move straight into the movement aspect. Now, when you're playing this game for the first time casually, you're probably going to be just doing a lot of straightforward flight, like so. But you might notice something here. It's kind of slow. But there are methods to fix that, which I'll be covering right now. So if you're familiar with other old-school first-person shooter speedruns, you'd know that there's something called strafe running. This is pretty common. It's common in old shooters. It's one of the most used techniques in, say, the Doom speedrun. So what that is you can combine movement direction in both like forward and horizontal movement to obtain a higher overall movement speed. So in this case, I'm going to point my destination kind of towards the right edge of my screen, and I'm going to move forward and right. And you may have noticed that was a little bit faster than just the straightforward movement. But, being, again, full 3D movement and rotation, this isn't as far as we can push it. What we want is movement in all 3 dimensions at the same time. So, this time I'm going to point my destination kind of in the corner of my screen, and I'm going to move forward, right, and down all at the same time. And what you're going to see is that I'm moving much, much faster. This is about 60% faster than normal movement. This is generally referred to as tricording within the community, as you're combining 3 different directions of movement, and is something that you'll want to make sure you are very well practiced in. This is absolutely essential to Descent speedrunning. Granted, the movement is pretty hard to get used to, so on your first couple runs, if you just want to stick with more traditional movement, maybe a couple bichords, strafe running, here and there, that's fine. Just, get comfortable with the route, and gradually, as you get more comfortable, start working in those trichords. The important thing about tricording, though, of course, is as you can clearly see, my destination is not on my screen at all. So, if there's an enemy in my path, there's not much I can do about that. So, you need to practice coming in and out of trichords constantly in order to deal with enemies that are trying to block your path. So, come out of a trichord, blast enemies away, go right back into a trichord. So that's a movement you'll have to practice and get used to if you want to really put on the good times. But that'll pretty much do it for movement, so I'm going to cover the basic weaponry. Lasers are going to be your starting weapon, not quad level 4 obviously, but you're going to want to make sure you're decent with these because you'll be using these a couple times in the early game and a couple other points in the run, particularly around death warping. You also have the Spreadfire Cannon. This is going to be kind of a little bit later, but still an early game weapon for the most part. Also used a couple points later in the run during death warping strategies as kind of a substitute for your primary weapon will actually be. Your main primary weapon, speaking of which, will be the Fusion Cannon. You don't get this until level 10, but it is absurdly powerful. It has the highest damage of any primary weapon in the game, can burst out a ton of damage, and most importantly, the projectiles pierce through multiple enemies and can clear hordes out pretty quickly. So, unfortunately though, it shakes your ship as you're charging it up, so you're going to have to get used to compensating for that and trying to keep your weapons aimed straight down the line. You also note that you start to lose shield as you charge. The damage cap is actually a little bit of the ways into the shield loss threshold. Once you've lost about 7 shield charging up a single shot, you will be around the damage cap, so there's no real point in charging it beyond that. So that looks like about there. When you fully overcharge like that, you can one-shot Red Hulks and a lot of the earlier game reactors. But fully, completely just tap shots like that will one-shot light drillers and a lot of weaker enemies, so it has a lot of utility, and you'll want to make sure you are very well versed in this. The other primary weapon you're going to be seeing a lot isn't so much used as a weapon, the Vulcan Cannon. Now, as I've mentioned before, tricording gets a little tricky when there are things in your path, whether they be enemies or, say, doors. Now, Vulcan Cannon is kind of a pseudo-hit scan weapon. It shoots very fast-moving, invisible projectiles. Now, any other method for opening doors, like I'll use a flare here, and you'll see that as I tricorded towards the door after shooting the flares, I hit the door as it was still opening, and that brought me to a stop. That's no good. So, instead, we're going to use the Vulcan Cannon, and that lets me open the door from a further distance away much more quickly, and it'll be fully open by the time I reach it, and I can fly through unimpeded. So, something you're going to have to get used to is lots of rapid switching between whatever your current primary weapon is, generally going to be Fusion, and the Vulcan Cannon to open doors quickly. So, switch Vulcan Cannon, shoot some enemies, Vulcan Cannon, open door, Fusion Cannon, shoot some enemies, Vulcan Cannon, open door. You get the idea. The last primary weapon, which I am not even going to cover, is the Plasma Cannon. It is not used in the run at all. It's an okay weapon. It's better than basic lasers, but the routing is such that there should never be a case where you need to use it. So there's no reason to concern yourself with it. As to secondary weapons, you've got your basic concussion missiles. They're generally going to be your most frequently used secondary weapon, especially because you get refilled to 5 concussion missiles on a death or upon starting a new level if you are below that 5 count. So free missiles are definitely something you want to take advantage of when possible. Homing missiles do a little bit more damage and track enemies. Most importantly, they one-shot those obnoxious drillers, the Vulcan Cannon enemies. You'll be primarily using them to kill those, although they can also be useful in bursting down some of the tougher enemies like Red Hulks and Fusion Hulks. We've also got proximity bombs. You'll only be using these a couple times in the run, mainly to cover your tracks when you're going to backtrack through a hallway but have enemies on your tail, and you want to keep them a little further back, or just, if you're lucky, kill them outright if they decide to ram into the mines. You've also got smart missiles. A little bit rare of a pickup, and you're generally going to be using these at specifically routed times. Same goes for mega missiles. Mega missiles are mainly going to be used to clear out a couple of tougher rooms quickly and to fight the final boss. You need to be very careful with their usage though, because they have a huge blast radius that will do lots of damage if you're anywhere near the explosion, as you can see right there. So that covers all of the weaponry and all the movement, so that's going to be it for this segment. On the next segment, I will launch right into the actual speedrunning route with the first level, and we'll progress through the game from there. So thanks for tuning in, and you can head on over to the first level tutorial at this point.